Kind of scanning our room. Staying steady at 26 participants. Awesome. My camera is like pointed one direction, but all my participants, I see them on the side here, so that's why I'm looking off to the side. But all right, I'll just stop talking now and leave it over to you, Taryn.
Awesome. Well, good morning and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful Friday. My name is Taryn Molitor, and I'm a family support coordinator with the eye care program of St. Vincent de Paul CDA. And I have the pleasure today of presenting with Shannon Fox. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Shannon?
Yeah, my name is Shannon Fox. I live in Pocatello, Idaho, and I work with the Bannock Youth Foundation, which is a nonprofit here in the community that you'll be learning about. And I am also working with the Department of Health and Welfare as well.
Awesome. Do you want to go ahead and push forward the slide?
Yeah, see if it, there we go.
There we go. And I am with the eye care program, like I said, of St. Vincent de Paul, North Idaho. And we are going to be reporting today on the multi-year grant we got from the ICTF that covered regions 1 and 2. And Shannon's going to be talking to you about what they've been doing in regions 5, 6, and 7. So as we're getting ready to focus in on the topic of stewards of children and child sexual abuse, go ahead and just take a minute to yourself, a second to yourself, and write down a name of a child or someone in your life, maybe that you've run into or that's in your family, that you think may have had an experience with abuse or trauma in their lives. This is not something we're going to be sharing out loud. It's simply for you to have next to you or in front of you as we're going through this training, just to kind of remind yourself of why we're here and the heart behind why we do what we do. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us now. Okay, go ahead, Shannon. Okay, a cool little poll is going to pop up in front of you to give Shannon and I a feel for your exposure or knowledge of what Darkness to Light's program, Stewards of Children, is. So I think Jesse's going to pop that up for us.
And we can see a lot of you are joining from organizations that are working with families. And so, you know, this poll is to help us kind of understand your organization's familiarity with the program that we are, you know, working with and we have been working with. Great to see everybody's responses, and I'm sure all of you can connect to the little zone-in activity that we did. I mean, all of us have people in our lives that have experienced something, and you probably wrote down one name or multiple names. So we appreciate you doing that activity and then going through this poll. Got a bunch of stuff pouring in for it.
So we're kind of tied. The top 3, we've heard about it, we've taken it, and then not even heard about it before. So that's good. Full range.
Some learning will be done at this time. All right. I think, yep, so polling is closed. So
okay.
Are people able to see those shared results there? Nice.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and stop sharing those results then.
Catherine Gregory, you're like up on my screen, so I'm watching you, girl. You're giving me the only feedback I can see, so that's good. Okay, so I need to minimize the poll. Awesome. So just as we get going, I don't want to spend too much time on statistics because I know that can kind of be dry, but we also want to show that statistics do absolutely back up the fact that our communities need to be doing something to prevent child sexual abuse in our area. And so those of you who are familiar with Stewards of Children probably are familiar with the stat that 1 in 10 children these days will be sexually abused by their 18th birthday, which if any of you guys are parents, you totally know 1 is way too many. And even if you're not parents, 1 in 10 kiddos is just too much. And so they deserve us to be fighting for them and setting up safeguards in our communities to protect them. The other stat I have highlighted there, just because human trafficking is a huge hot button, a hot topic right now, that 80% of human trafficking victims were sexually abused as children. So if we can put the work in and the time and the effort into preventing this tragedy that kiddos have to go through, it could affect those statistics as well. And then just bringing it home to Idaho, those were more national facts. Idaho itself had near 500 adult offenders and about 200 juvenile offenders back at the time of the report of fiscal year 2019. And so it is a problem in good old Idaho too. And as in reference to the counties that Shannon and I serve, Kootenai County was actually the third highest county in Idaho. We had 69 adult offenders and Bannock had 32. And we both of our counties saw 23 juvenile offenders. And so there's work to be done. Go ahead, Shannon. Okay, so I'm going to segue over to Shannon's going to take off and let you know what Bannock Youth Foundation decided to do about child sexual abuse problem down in Pocatello, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes.
All right, thank you, Taryn. Yeah, so our organizations, we both received funding from the Idaho Children's Trust Fund to help approach and try to work on the issue of bringing child sexual abuse education out into our communities. So as I mentioned before, and because we have a couple of new people that joined us, my name is Shannon Fox. I'm with the Bannock Youth Foundation down in Pocatello, Idaho. The Bannock Youth Foundation is a nonprofit that's been around for about 40 years, running a bunch of different programs. And my program that I worked with under the 3-year grant that we had that I'm reporting on today was actually called the Stewards of Children initiative. So the initiative overview, and I'm going to minimize some stuff so I can see what I had for you guys here, was that we received a grant from October of 2016 to September of 2019. And this was a partnership that allowed the Bannock Youth Foundation and the Idaho Children's Trust Fund to work together on increasing just child sexual abuse prevention, education for our community, that it was available, education on the problem throughout both Eastern and Southern Idaho. So it all kind of kicked off when the Bannock Youth Foundation and the Idaho Children's Trust Fund were working together, and they were able to kind of hire an AmeriCorps VISTA, which is a national volunteer service position, a national volunteer service position. And these funds allowed the Bannock Youth Foundation to hire a worker for up to 3 years. So this worker was hired outside of the grant that we received from the trust fund to kind of increase our efforts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But this VISTA position that I took for years 2 and 3 just really was supposed to help kind of create the capacity for prevention. And so the position was centered around providing the training from Darkness to Light, the child sexual abuse prevention curriculum. And the position would also handle things like the local Child Abuse Prevention Month and awareness events throughout the year. So it was kind of designed to have a lot of flexibility to do that, which was great because we had to kind of change things up to fit the needs of our community. So I came into the AmeriCorps position in 2016 when we also applied for the grant from the Idaho Children's Trust Fund to increase our capacity. And we were able to start working with the highlighted communities here on this map. So you'll see that regions 5, 6, and 7 were kind of recognized as needing more assistance in getting things going. Now I will say 5, 6, and 7, those regions of Idaho, there's a lot of rural communities in there, which were one of the reasons why we wanted to increase our capacity, because reaching out to those rural communities, did take a little bit more to be able to provide services. So our outline for the grant was that we were going to train 30 facilitators within the time frame of the grant. Those facilitators, we highlighted that we wanted to bring in people from our rural communities to make sure that we weren't leaving anybody out. We also noticed that we needed to secure some funding for workbooks for Stewards of Children. If you guys, for those of you who are and who are not familiar with the training, the workbooks are an amazing resource that are utilized during the training, and people take them home after. They do have a cost of $10 per workbook. So if we're trying to go out and train communities in large capacity and make sure that we can bring everybody into that, we need to have some funds for people who can't pay for those workbooks. So we wanted to make sure that we could have some workbooks for free. We also just wanted to assist the larger and smaller communities of Eastern Idaho in accessing the Stewards of Children training, and just make sure that we weren't leaving anyone behind, as I've mentioned. So the 2016 kickoff, we were able to train over 1,000 people in Stewards of Children, which was really cool to see, and it started very rapidly. We had a lot of really big trainings that helped us get those numbers up, but we also had a lot of really small trainings. We would do community trainings that maybe had anywhere from just one person to maybe 10 or 15 people, but anybody that is trained in child sexual abuse prevention will be able to go out and help their communities and protect children. So it was amazing to have one person, and it was just wonderful that we could see that we trained over 1,000 in that 2016 year. Now, to host Stewards of Children trainings, you need facilitators. Those facilitators go through a process of being authorized by Darkness to Light itself. And so we needed to make sure we were training new facilitators to help us move this effort out into our communities. Prior to 2016, we only had 15 facilitators, and not all of those were active. So as part of the grant, we started to do some facilitator workshops. You'll see in the picture here with a couple of whiteboards that we have Wix McColl training up 10 new facilitators that first year. And you'll also see, as I mentioned, we wanted to increase prevention and capacity for education in our community in other ways. So we created this trick or treat, and I'll continue to talk about that in the next couple of slides because it really did make an impact in our community and it was fun to watch. So we kind of move into 2017 and we saw another 750 people trained in Stewards of Children. Those numbers were down a little bit from our first year. Some of that was just lack of interest by organizations and communities. When we're going out to communities, sometimes it's hard to help express why this kind of difficult topic needs to be, presented. Child sexual abuse is not something people normally are ready to engage in. So we didn't reach our goal of 1,000 people in that year, but we were able to train 19 more facilitators, and that was the training done out of Region 7 with a lot of individuals who were from school districts and the university in that area. We were also able to expand our prevention month quite a bit. That was part of my position as a VISTA, was to help expand prevention month. We had a parade, a rally, we had more pinwheel gardens. We had a lot of participation from the community. You can see that in these pictures. And then we were also able to increase our impact of the Ghostly Gathering Child Abuse Prevention Trick or Treat. We moved to an indoor location and we doubled in size to about 2,500 people joining us, with about, I would say, 40 to 50 businesses being a part of that effort. So success seen in 2018, we had 950 more people trained in Stewards of Children. This picture on the top left, you'll see a room. This was in Jefferson County, I believe, St. Anthony. I'll maybe double check my facts there later, but this was in St. Anthony. We had a free community training. Thanks to having those funds for the 3,000 workbooks, we were able to host free trainings. And we had 75 people show up in a pretty small community. St. Anthony is not that big, and they packed this room. It was really amazing to see. It was a little nerve-wracking, but that helped us really kind of increase our impact in that smaller community. You'll also see in some of these pictures, you'll see the Prevent Child Abuse sign down here. You'll see this kind of banquet looking picture, and this was when we were able to expand prevention months to have a benefit for survivors and advocates. We had a fun run. We joined a parade, we worked with the hospital. It was amazing to kind of see that effort. And then also in 2018, we were able to host 2 free child abuse prevention conferences in rural communities. So we had one in Driggs, which is in Region 7 of Idaho, and then we had one down in Malad. Malad saw great attendance with over 40 people attending, and it was wonderful to be able to do that. Now, we wrapped up this grant and this part of our effort in 2019, and by September 2019, we saw over 3,500 people trained in preventing child sexual abuse and 6 more Stewards of Children facilitators. We were also able to create a lot of new and really strong partnerships with different organizations. One of the most notable partnerships was with the Idaho State University, where we actually had the university help us in sponsoring Child Abuse Prevention Month. In the top picture on the left side, you'll see actually the president of Idaho State University kind of helping us kick off our prevention rally for 2019. And that was a really amazing thing. We also partnered to teach classes at the continuing education and workforce training part of the university. We partnered with our Portneuf Hospital here locally in Pocatello. It was just amazing to see those partnerships increase. And one of the things with Stewards of Children is the more individuals you have interacting and learning about the training, the more your community is going to maybe start asking for it, being involved with it, and participating in those efforts. Stewards of Children will actually call this a tipping point. So our goal really is to try and train 5% of any community that we're working with to have this kind of discussion about child sexual abuse become a natural part of the community. And Taryn's actually going to talk a little bit more about that in her presentation. So you'll learn a little bit more about that tipping point concept. But it was just really wonderful to kind of wrap up 2019, the grant in 2019, just knowing that we were able to meet some of our goals. We still had things that we wanted to work on. So we were still planning for, a better and brighter future. I'm just going to briefly go over what went well, because I think it's always good to take stock of the things that, were positive and really helped us, and how we were able to meet the grant outlines that the objectives we put into the grant. So we were able to secure the books and funds needed to provide free trainings, as well as host conferences for child abuse prevention in rural communities. It's really interesting when you're going out into rural communities. I always went out to them and asked what they were looking for, what they were interested in, and that's what helped us kind of make those successful. We held facilitator workshops that brought on over 40 new people to our team. We hosted many Stewards of Children trainings in both larger and smaller communities of Southern and Eastern Idaho. Like I mentioned, those regions 5, 6, and 7 of Idaho are pretty rural, so there were times where it was driving down to Grace, Idaho, with a population, I believe, of under 1,000 to train their educators and their teachers at their school district, or just heading over to Fort Hall to train individuals participating in a conference and training about 70 to 80 people there. We also were able to create those partnerships that I've mentioned that allowed us to have more routine trainings occur, because the partnerships were strong enough to where people were wanting us to come back and to continue providing those educational resources. We also designed those new community events. I will say by 2019, the Ghostly Gathering was even more successful than I could ever imagine. That community event last year brought together around 4,500 people and about 70 businesses together. And it was really cool because every individual that came through that community trick or treat actually received a flyer about child sexual abuse prevention. Okay, so what did we struggle with, right? Because there's a lot of struggles in these kinds of efforts. There's things that you plan that maybe don't go as well as you had hoped. So what we struggled with, we did train a lot of facilitators, but they did not go on to train as many individuals as we hoped. And that just comes down to a lot of issues that aren't necessarily in our control. When individuals become trained as facilitators, it's more a volunteer agreement rather than a mandatory thing that they do. And so if their roles change, if their lives change, that kind of changes maybe their ability to go out and train. So that was definitely a struggle of ours. So many communities and organizations are still also kind of resistant to participate in training. It's challenging to have organizations open up 2 to 3 hours of their time for us to come in and provide this training to their staff. That's a barrier that I think we're still going to see no matter what, especially right now because everybody's so busy. But it's not one that we just want to ignore. We're going to try and work with that. And we did see that go well. The free community trainings that we hosted were also often met with low attendance despite advertising efforts and incentive programs. I always tried to get some free food, pizza, raffle items for those free community trainings. And that was really just an opportunity to invite people to be a part of our effort and to educate themselves. But those things don't necessarily always go very well. Community trainings for an issue like child sexual abuse can be kind of intimidating, but we did see some success. It was just varied, and often we did see lower numbers, which any one person, like I mentioned, being trained in child sexual abuse still makes a huge difference. We were also limited because the capacity of our staff members, so my position after our AmeriCorps VISTA grant ended, was lowered and limited. So we had some challenges with having enough hours that could be worked towards meeting some of these goals. We continue to try and work with that. That's why we created some of the events that we did as fundraisers to make sure that our efforts could go on as long as possible. And ways to increase the capacity of our efforts were also limited by funding. So everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with the challenges of having enough man hours and having enough funding. I mean, we don't necessarily, stop what we're doing, and our passion doesn't end because of that, but it does get challenged because of that. So I will say that the work is far from over. We have experienced closed doors, but there's also a lot of ones that have opened. We have a continued relationship with the Idaho Children's Trust Fund to work on making sure that we can continue providing these resources. We have different relationships with organizations. Our community is a little bit more aware and interested and invested in what we're doing. So we have been able to secure more funding through those partnerships. And we know that we can move forward in providing child sexual abuse prevention curriculum to communities, going to them, asking what they need and how we can help kind of fill that gap for maybe the lack of education around child sexual abuse in general and around prevention. So I kind of ran through that. We have an activity that we're trying to make sure there's enough time for at the end of this presentation. And I know this part where we're just kind of going through this grant information can be a little bit dry. And so if you do have any questions, I'll take a minute maybe to answer any of those, and you can put them in the chat or you can unmute. And then we're actually going to, during that time, we're going to be switching it up over to Taryn. So I'm going to be stopping my share, giving you all a second. We have 29 people with us. All right.
Do you see anything popping up in the chat, Shannon?
I don't know if I just talked too fast.
No, you did a great job. I will just continue on, and then if we have time at the end, we'll circle back up and look in the chat and see if there's any questions we can answer for you. But like I had introduced at the beginning, my name is Taryn Molitor with the Eye Care Program of St. Vincent de Paul, North Idaho. We are based out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we have been in existence to some degree for 28 years, but it wasn't until 1998 where things kind of got more formalized. We had home visitors, and the organization just became something more solidified. So we've been doing Darkness to Light Stewards since 2005-ish. It was sketchy as far as not a major emphasis back then, but it's kind of been gaining momentum throughout the years, and hopefully you'll see that momentum has kind of built up to the outcomes that we were blessed to see come out of our grant. Let's see here. I need to pull up. I don't know why it's not. There we go. Okay. Sorry. So we too applied for a multi-year grant through the Idaho Children's Trust Fund. And so our project dates were October 2016 through September 19. And our goal points were, as you can see here, to provide 30 stewards of trainings throughout regions 1 and 2 each year. We wanted to encourage agencies to earn the partner in prevention distinction, which for those of you who aren't clear what that means exactly, there's a protocol that an agency would need to follow to get that designation for 1 year. And the bullet points are for that is that they need to make prevention a priority by using the Stewards of Children to train their staff and volunteers who interact with youth, conduct background checks on staff and volunteers who work with youth, and then also implement policy that limits opportunities for one adult, one child interactions. And so you'll see we were able to get that with one agency in our area, which was super awesome. And then we said we were going to provide stewards to home visit families and parenting class participants, which that is one of the parts that I was most involved in the parenting class trainings. I'll share that in a little bit as well. And then expand Region 2 partnerships, because in Region 1 here, yes, we've got the hub of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, Hayden. You know, we have a good pool of people to work through with here, but then, you know, you go north towards the Canadian border to Sandpoint and Bonners, it gets more rural. And then if you head down to north central Idaho, you know, our reach for this grant was all the way down to Riggins. And so that's a lot of mileage and connections and partnerships needing to be built. And so we really wanted to work on nurturing those partnerships so we could get adults trained who could then provide the trainings to their individual communities. What we'd found over the past years of providing stewards is, you know, little old me could come from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and go down to Grangeville, let's say, and provide a stewards training. And it would be great. I mean, the information's great and conversations would be good. But there's just something about having homegrown, you know, citizens taking ownership of that education and then presenting it to the people that they live and do life with. And so we really wanted to nurture those relationships between the facilitators we already had down there, so they could just get that momentum and that energy, that passion going to take it to their community as well. At the completion of our grant, we wanted to have 30, or we said we were going to have 30 trained stewards facilitators throughout regions 1 and 2 who could then carry on the charge moving forward. So just with any program, like most of us are probably aware, there's, you know, speed bumps and hurdles and some challenges. And when we had first came up with this grant project, we had hinged it on the fact that we would have a VISTA prevention coordinator to run it, operate it. And Justine, she was awesome. She would do monthly newsletters with the facilitators. She had constant communication, you know, from the trainers we have all over regions 1 and 2. They felt heard, they felt appreciated. She was able to just build that relationship with them, which in turn, you know, encouraged them to be active in providing stewards information to their areas. But that funding cut, like most of you know, was cut in, or it happened in June 2018. We were lucky enough to be able to swing having Justine with us a couple more months after that, but then she was gone. And our eye care staff is very minimal. With, you know, three to 5 people carrying the charge and doing all the other things that they needed to do, this was a major challenge for us, because that person whose sole responsibility was to nurture and work on stewards in regions 1 and 2 was now gone. And so just like you do when you get knocked down, right? Resiliency, you get back up and you just keep on doing what you can do. Another challenge we faced, like Shannon had kind of mentioned too, is we'd spend the time and the effort in getting adults trained to be certified facilitators or authorized facilitators with Darkness to Light, but then they weren't doing the trainings like we would have hoped. You know, they loved the information, they were excited, but whether it be nerves, like I don't feel comfortable enough doing this, or lack of being able to find the space to hold it in, or lack of interest, whatever it may be, a lot of the facilitators were not near as active as we would have liked. So it's not super accurate to have these next 2 bullet points listed in challenges, because I think it's one of the awesome parts of doing this work. You know, when these things come up in trainings with myself, that I love those conversations I get to have with people, but they are something that we saw some of our newer facilitators, like, you know, contact us and be like, whoa, how do we deal with this? And oh, I didn't know what to say, kind of thing. So with stewards, as you're presenting this information on preventing child sexual abuse, you know, one adult, one child interactions are not super awesome. We want to minimize those at all costs. We want to not have kiddos, you know, sit on our laps. We don't want to full frontal hug for sure, but if we can minimize hugging and just stick to fist bumps, high fives, those kind of things, you know, those are the ideas being presented as alternatives that are healthier in stewards. So as you can see, when we're getting into child care centers or CASA volunteers, or, you know, just we trained all age ranges of adults, you come into contact with generational attitudes on, you know, personal space, hugging, boundaries. You know, a lot of people were raised with, I don't care if you don't know Aunt Karen, but if she comes over for a family get together, you need to give her a hug kind of thing, or go ahead and hug grandma, or, you know, these kind of things that us as parents and adults might not realize we're doing, but we are. It's this generational attitude that could, in a yucky situation, potentially put a child at harm, and so, or at risk. And so stewards could kind of buck that idea, those attitudes. We could kind of rub into each other, and there were great conversations had on it, but it was definitely something for those facilitators who were new to this, you know, realm of conversation, that they definitely wanted some support on, you know, how do I answer nicely? How do I stick to, you know, the truth and what's been shown to be healthiest, but not disrespect others and stuff. So that's just something to kind of expect anytime we're talking about a controversial, intimate type topic. And then also, lots of times in trainings, I would almost say in every single one of the trainings that I myself have done, there's disclosure to some effect, whether it be during the span of the training where somebody's like, yeah, I was sexually abused as a child myself, or they come and have a conversation afterwards about what they went through. We just got to be prepared for those hard conversations. And again, it was one of those things that newer facilitators were like, whoa, you know, what do I do with this? How do I interact? And, you know, the answer is empathy, number one. Like, hear them out, not in the context of a training. You'd want to like say that I could talk to you, you know, after the training. It's not appropriate for the context of the training, but I want to hear your story. But then when you're engaging, you know, one-on-one with those people sharing their stories, you know, empathy is so important, and hearing them out and practicing what steward stands for. You know, listen to them, believe them, it's not their fault, just reassure, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of support care with our facilitators, like, don't freak out, this isn't weird, this is just something that kind of comes up with the education topic we're talking about, and hopefully equipped them to deal with that in the best way that they could. Okay, so you know, we kept on trucking. We lost Justine, which was a major hit, but we kept on trucking. Now we get to the outcomes of our grant, which we were super excited about. So we ended up providing 162 stewards trainings in regions 1 and 2, which surpassed our ultimate goal, which was awesome. And 27 of our facilitators held at least one training, and then 5 did at least 10. So again, a huge majority of them did one training, which we would love. You know, we could increase greatly if each of those 27 were doing more, but they did their part for this slice of time, and hopefully moving forward we'll see continued engagement. And then 5 facilitators did at least 10 trainings, which was great. At the completion of the grant, we now have 30 trained authorized facilitators for Stewards of Children throughout regions 1 and 2, which will allow moving forward, you know, the info, the interest, the energy, passion to spread to North and North Central Idaho in a way that it wasn't able to before, when it was just a few of us trying to hold it all and get down to, you know, remote communities and such. It'll be great moving forward. And then in August 2019, we also were able to offer an advanced facilitator training to the facilitators who had been prior trained, and 10 people attended that. And that is a great venue. If you're a facilitator and have not yet been through that one, it's, I don't want to say like more laid back, but definitely engaging. Like you have the place to be able to bring these questions and the challenges that come up with. with having trainings, and you're able to kind of round table solve them and have support from a certified instructor. So we were super glad to be able to have that. And then I hinted earlier that we were able to get one agency deemed a partner in prevention, and that was Mountain States Early Head Start here in Coeur d'Alene. So we were super, super happy and proud of that partnership. One thing that Katie, my boss, has worked super hard with is getting, because our agency is actually under the umbrella of St. Vincent de Paul. And so she has worked tirelessly with staff and all the things that need to fall into place to make this happen. But it has become St. Vincent policy for all staff to be trained in the full Stewards of Children training within 90 days of hire. And then they have ongoing education required too every 3 years to take the bystanders supplemental training, which, if you're not sure what, again, if you're unfamiliar with Stewards of Children, they have the full training, Stewards, which is about 2 hours to 2:15, and then they have 5 supplemental options, which takes the topics talked about in the broad Stewards and then breaks them down into 1.5 hour little chunks. They're awesome. If you have not taken them, I would highly recommend doing that, or attend one in your community that's being provided, because they're super, super helpful to continue the conversation about stewards and child sexual abuse prevention in our homes and in our communities. We also were able to provide stewards to 14 home visit families and 44 parenting classes. And I can vouch. I used to be a home visitor, but now I'm strictly a facilitator and instructor with classes and with stewards. And I have absolutely loved having stewards integrated into the nurturing skills for families classes that I teach. We also have it in the nurturing fathers and any other parenting classes we offer. We have embedded it into the time frame that the class goes. And what I've seen be super awesome about that is you already have a captive audience, right? It cuts down on some of the marketing that goes down in us just holding a community, which we do that too, but us just holding a community training, there's marketing, you have to take time and effort and make flyers and all that great stuff, which we still do. But with parenting classes, the people are already there. They're already signed up. It's embedded. And then the awesome part is that I have 13 weeks with those people. And so instead of just a little 2-hour, snippet of training, which is awesome, but I usually put it like in the middle, probably about week 8 of my classes. And so building up to it, I can hint at, facts and statistics and stuff that they're going to be learning in the training. Then they have the training, and then we have those other 4 or 5 weeks to continue building rapport and relationship with the students, to have those ongoing conversations, because they just have a higher level of comfortability with the instructor too. So that has been super great, having those in our parenting classes, and we will continue to do that moving forward. We also expanded our partnerships. That was one of, the title of our goal was to extend our reach. We can't just be about Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, Hayden kind of thing. We need to reach out and branch out and get our state covered. And so we expanded partnerships with Gritman Medical Center in Moscow, Potlatch Library, Lewis Clark State College, Latah Recovery Center, and the Nez Perce After School Program. So great things happening there. And then we also now have in our community an Active Strengthening Families Coalition, who has met quarterly and kept in contact quarterly despite COVID. And they're currently working on a Ribbons of Hope traveling display, which that picture on your screen is kind of a sample of that their goal is to get around the community to continue spreading awareness and education about stewards. Shannon had shared a little bit about Tipping Point earlier, and this is one of the things that's super exciting for us, is that we were able to reach that 5% tipping point in 7 different Region 1 communities and 5 Region 2 communities. Our new within a few people. And for those of you who aren't super familiar with what tipping point means, it's a theory created by Gladwell that says, quote, "The tipping point is that magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses the threshold, tips, and spreads like wildfire." And so, reaching that point in these communities is like, okay, you've climbed the hill and now it's on. There's enough people who know what's up and how to better prevent child sexual abuse in their communities, that hopefully it's going to start spreading like a wildfire. And our goal at iCare, and probably any of us prevention people would say the same thing, is to create a support network in our communities that theoretically wherever a child could go, whether they're at the park, they're at, you know, a church children's ministry session, or you know, just walking down the street, riding their bike to school, at school, all those things, that wherever they go, the dream would be that they'd be safe, right? That there's enough of us educated and caring about their well-being, that we would be taking the measures to prevent bad things from happening. So this is super exciting as well for us. These are just a few pictures of, like, it's taken years. I just want to be clear about that, because as Shannon was sharing, her program's a little newer than us, right? So her outcomes look different. We've been working at this since 2005-ish, right? And so it just shows this like developmental stage of bringing an idea and practices to our communities. And we're proud to say that as the momentum is built over the years with our relationship with our community, we now have people that buy into Children's, you know, Child Abuse Prevention Month, and Thumbs Up for Child Abuse, and Wear Blue days. You know, these are Trinity Lutheran Church ladies, they're Kiwanis, CASA, the Coeur d'Alene School District. It's just awesome to see, like, we're not talking a foreign language in our community anymore because of the work that has been put in over these years. That, you know, if it's tough now in your community, if you're not getting buy-in, or if you're struggling and a little bit like deflated feeling, just keep trucking, because it's going to come in spurts. There's going to be times where you just fly and it feels awesome, and then you'll kind of hit this little bit of wall, maybe even backtrack a little bit, but just keep going, because, you know, if I was to show you pictures from 2005 to now, there'd be stark differences. So your work matters, and keep on doing it. It will happen eventually. So where are we now, right? The year of COVID. We are still, we haven't had community trainings, obviously, due to restriction, just the details that would be involved in that just yet. But we are offering them in our parenting classes as well. And we've still been able to train over 50 people in 2020. I've had 2 parenting classes in the spring over Zoom, and I just started one now that we'll have the training in as well. So that was a chunk of the people that were able to get trained. And then there were a few else that were held around the area. So we just hope that we can get back out there and be more frequently being able to provide this education. But we've also been able, or gained the right to, or the ability through trainings, to offer stewards virtually. And so now we have this other venue of reach that we are excited to explore and see what that might look like. So that even despite regulations outside the buildings or outside your homes, that people can still participate and go through the training. We've also shifted some focus to promoting the supplemental trainings, which, like I said, they're only an hour and a half long. So it's a little bit less of a bite to take off, a little less time commitment for people, more interactive and engaged, not more engaging, but they are engaging, to where it's a good, like, bouncing point, like, oh, you liked this supplemental training, guess what, you should try the full training. And so we've kind of shifted from only offering the fulls to using the supplementals to then create rapport with the people, to then promote them to, like, say, hey, you should check out the full thing too. Okay, so I am done talking for this second. It's time for you guys to get your thinking caps on. And Shannon is going to lead us through this capacity building tool that she created. So I'm just going to throw it right over, and you can get going, Shannon.
All right, thank you. We did end up having a question right before you started your presentation asking about what was going on in Region 2. And you answered that with your presentation, talking about all the amazing things that you're doing. I just want to let everybody know, whether I did see, you know, in our chat box when we were asking you to introduce yourself, we have people from Washington here. I know that there are people at the conference who are from Oregon. And so, you know, this is not just Region 1 and 2, 5, 6, and 7 of Idaho effort. Stewards of Children is an internationally known training. Darkness to Light is an internationally known nonprofit. They have a lot of resources. somebody was asking about if there was a website where they could find more information about Stewards of Children. And thank you for asking that question. We don't want you to just listen to us and then be like, oh, well, that was cool to hear about it. We want you to go and get active, which is what this activity is about. But I just want to highlight that if you want to get trained, if you want to learn more, if you're maybe in need of resources, if you have experienced maybe or know somebody who's experienced sexual abuse and they need some resources, just anything like that, go to Darkness to Light, and you can see all the different trainings they have, all the different types of support that they have. There's also the Flip the Switch campaign, which is allowing people to take the Stewards of Children training online for free. So you can go to fliptheswitch.org and you can learn about how to take that on your own time, just with your computer, with yourself, and just do that one-on-one. Also, Darkness to Light has a bunch of different trainings, those supplemental trainings. They actually have a training on commercial sexual exploitation of children, which is really, really important during these times where human trafficking, like we mentioned earlier, is a hot button topic. They also have protecting children during a crisis training that they're offering for free as well. And that's a really cool training that they put together pretty rapidly to help address the needs for children and families during this time. We know, or most of us have heard at least, about how right now there are concerns that children are experiencing higher levels of abuse, and there's less ability for mandated reporters to help protect those children because those children are not necessarily interacting with those mandated reporters, who are often the individuals who make the reports to give those children some assistance. So the fact that Darkness to Light recognized and rapidly put together a free training program that's amazing for protecting children during a time of crisis was really cool to see. So go explore, see their Facebook. They host live events all the time. They're trying to really help people express the needs that, you know, are so often connected to child sexual abuse or really any type of abuse. So definitely a great resource. But now that I've gone through my presentation, Taryn's gone through hers, we're going to ask you to kind of start engaging and thinking about prevention capacity in your community. So Taryn, I'm going to have you flip the slide real quick.
Okay, there we go.
All right, so we put this up on the Padlet, and I believe Jesse linked this earlier on the chat. I think I might have him, oh, look at that, he's right on top of it. So Jesse, our tech host, just put capacity building tool into the chat box again, so you have access to this. When we were thinking about doing this presentation, we know presenting on grants, maybe got some ideas flowing, maybe you were really interested in hearing about what 2 Idaho organizations did, but we want you to think about what you can do, what your communities can do, what your organization can do. So we made this capacity building tool, and honestly, we made this for an in-person setting. We made this for the conference in March. You know, we were hoping that that's the space that we could use it at, but we're going to kind of try it out and see how it works here in this online setting. We're going to do that all together. There's about 31 of us in here today, so I think we can really get some great discussion going. If you were able to print this off beforehand, great. If you just want to pull it up on this, like on a page next to the Zoom presentation, awesome. I know you can't really see it that well here. We do have individual slides for the questions, but I am just going to go through and read the goal of this activity real quick, and so we can transition right into it. And I think Taryn's going to be watching the chat box for any questions or concerns, but also feel free to unmute. I would love you to interrupt me so I can take a breath. So you can ask your question and I'll take a breath. But oh, and somebody's given us some tech advice. You can pitch to zoom in on your screen as well. So if that works for you, great. But let's get to it. So the goal of this activity really is to just bring people together who live or work in similar areas to map out where their communities are at with prevention, primary prevention of child abuse and trauma. The overall goal is to help communities talk about if they have access or engage with primary prevention. Now you're going to hear me say primary prevention pretty much throughout this entire activity. So just some definitions for you to kind of understand primary prevention versus other types of prevention. I'm going to go into those real quick. First, this is a capacity building tool. So capacity building is the process by which individuals and organizations obtain, improve, and retain the skills, knowledge, tools, equipment, and other resources needed to do their jobs competently. It allows individuals and organizations to perform at a greater capacity. That was really important to me, just kind of even looking back over the last 3 years of the grant. We want to increase our ability to do outreach for child abuse prevention, and we want to do that well. So how could we build up our ability to do that? So we're trying to focus in on primary prevention, which is trying to prevent child abuse and trauma from happening via education. So this is before it's happened. We're trying to bring in these concepts, this education, to make sure that children aren't experiencing abuse. Then you have secondary prevention, which is detecting, addressing the potential for child abuse and trauma to occur, and tertiary prevention, which is providing interventions when children are abused or have experienced trauma. So those are kind of just some things to have knowledge-wise, some language. But we want to work together through the following steps and questions so we can kind of understand what the capacity for prevention is within our individual organizations, because there's a lot of different maybe prevention aspects going on in just your organization, but then also in your community. So we're going to follow through the instructions, and we're not going to create groups in this setting. Normally we would, you know, in normal circumstances, we would probably have you guys get together in groups of individuals that live in the same area or work in a similar organization, so you can understand capacity from your viewpoint of your community or organization. But Taryn, I'm going to have you flip to the first slide for what the question is, and that is, if you have this printed out, or you can just kind of think about this to yourself, what is the name of your organization and what is your role and title? So really just easy first question. Does anybody want to shout out if they have a role that is connected into prevention, primary prevention, either in chat, or you can unmute if you think you have a role within an organization that's all about primary prevention? Give it a nice awkward Zoom 15 seconds to see. Got to give a little bit more time when it's a Zoom meeting, because that mute button sometimes doesn't like to be clicked off of. Florina works in child abuse prevention. Thank you, Florina. With the Family Advocates. Awesome. We heard a little bit from you yesterday. Child protection. Oh, Roger Sherman. Us too with the trust fund, of course. All right, so yeah, some great information being put into the chat box on this question. Just kind of allowing us to understand in the room is going to be helpful for these next couple of questions and steps. So we're going to move into step 2. I want you guys to be flexing your brains and get ready to talk a little bit, because this is where we're actually going to get into some really actionable and good discussion if people are feeling comfortable for it. So step 2 is we want to talk about what the current capacity for primary prevention of child abuse and trauma looks like in your community. And we're going to do that by answering the following questions. So we're going to talk a little bit. You can drop this in the chat. If you're not feeling up to talking or putting anything into the chat, you could just jot this down on the prevention capacity building tool or on another sheet of paper. So the question is, does your community have meetings or a hub for discussing child abuse and trauma primary prevention? If yes, we're going to have you explain what ways they're focusing on increasing primary prevention efforts. And if no, we'll discuss what local groups and organizations are working on primary prevention. So does anybody want to talk about if their community has a meeting or hub for discussing child abuse and trauma primary prevention? Caitlin says she doesn't know of any, and I'm going to maybe have, if you're comfortable, or Gabe also responded. So there's anybody here that maybe wants to unmute and talk about what they think could be something that's working towards primary prevention, or how they see an organization maybe doing primary prevention. Somebody unmuted.
That's me. I'm Pat Stevens with the Treasure Valley Children's Relief Nursery in Oregon. We're in Ontario, Oregon, and we are part of a network of relief nurseries in Oregon. There are about 20 of us right now, but of course we're over in the eastern part of Oregon, much closer to Boise than we are to Portland. So we love the Idaho Trust Fund letting us participate. We have a program that serves at-risk families. We have therapeutic classrooms for the children, and we do home visiting with the parents of these children that we have in our classroom. And it's very much focused on the child abuse prevention. And we're also part of a network in Oregon that is doing the Stewards of Children's presentations all around the state. And so that's where I'm from, and that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that contribution. That's, I think, one of the reasons why, we didn't decide to take this out is because even if we were in an in-person setting, having you work together with people in your community, you're going to learn things about maybe an organization that's doing something that's connected to primary prevention that you didn't know about in your own community. But in this setting, we have the ability to learn about what organizations are doing across a wide area. So there's a couple people that said, that they don't know that they have groups working in their communities to discuss primary prevention. Tennille from Idaho Department of Health and Welfare said they're looking to incorporate Darkness to Light into the Child Welfare Academy, which is amazing. And then somebody was saying, I don't know about prevention. We have more response effort teams. And then Roger contributed that, we have the Idaho Resilience Project, and there is the North Idaho Strengthening Families Roundtable. But my goal is to kind of help us assess, do we have places where we're talking about primary prevention? There was the MDT discussed earlier, and that's kind of a group that comes together normally for aftercare, talking about, how to kind of engage in tertiary prevention. What are we doing after it's already happened? But what is the capacity if our communities really organize some efforts around discussing primary prevention? How do we bring this in? How do we incorporate this into our communities so that way we're preventing things from happening to children in our communities? And so there are some great groups being discussed here. And so if you said no to this question, or you don't know, we just want to ask you to think about what local organizations are working on primary prevention in any capacity, and could those organizations come together to create some space to talk about primary prevention? One of the things my program is doing now that we've transitioned out of our 3-year grant that ended in September of 2019, we're trying to create coalitions or groups in every county to discuss primary prevention. Of course, in those discussions, you're going to be talking about how to help people who've already experienced things, how to recognize, how to, understand what's going on and how to help people. But if we try to get back even further to having those communities discuss primary prevention, we might be getting, creating more capacity essentially for people to get engaged. So anybody want to comment or ask any questions about, having those community hubs or meeting space for discussing primary prevention, or who would like maybe some guidance on how to do that or anything like that?
Hi, Shannon, it's Florida. I just wanted to say hi, that family strengthening, our prevention side of family advocates. We cover Canyon, Ada, and Elmore County. And I think Ada is pretty well covered, but Canyon and Elmore could definitely use some help. I know that we've had a little bit of trouble getting into like Elmore County just to kind of hold those parenting groups and get that prevention information out there. But as far as Canyon County, there, I think the 2C Kids Succeed would be a great way to help get some of this information out. And then I'm also part of the Caldwell Health Coalition, and I think that that would be another great place maybe to kind of help get this information out to parents in like those smaller towns.
Yeah. Yeah, and all we're really wanting to do is get our brains to kind of come together and click on, like, there's a lot of coalitions. There's a lot of organizations out there working on these topics of abuse and trauma, not just specifically for sexual abuse, but where are those organizations at in trying to bring us upstream a little bit? And, you know, there's the fix the bridge parable. You don't want people going across a bridge, falling into water because it's broken, and then floating down the river and then having to be pulled out later. You know, we want to try and put prevention steps in earlier. So Caitlin is asking if we can explain a little bit more about primary prevention and what that would look like. We will as we continue, because we're at 10:05 right now. We only have you guys for 10 more minutes, but we're going to go on to the next question. And as we do that, primary prevention is really bringing in like classes and education about how to, you know, prevent abuse from happening and how to encourage communities to be a part of that. And Caitlin, if you want to kind of discuss that, you can definitely reach out to me or we can continue that conversation. But just for the sake of time, we're going to move on to discussing what other services or organizations are present in your community that are working with primary prevention for child abuse and trauma. And this is something we were already touching on a little bit as we engaged with the first question. So, you know, there's a lot of child advocacy centers are going to be advocating for, you know, that we have primary prevention. I know the Child Advocacy Center in my community, they're working on providing services after things have happened, but they're also trying to get parents to engage in education to where they're still looking to prevent abuse and trauma. And so just as you think about those hubs, if there's, you know, if there isn't a hub in your community that's talking about primary prevention, if there's no group talking specifically about that, what organizations could you bring together? You know, what could be your role in helping those organizations come together to talk about primary prevention? And if they're already working on it, how can we get those groups working together? One of the challenges I've seen in my time with my role, maybe Taryn's seen this as well, or maybe some of you have seen this, but we have a lot of great organizations all working to try and improve outcomes for families, but they're doing it kind of siloed, especially when you have a bunch of rural communities and counties that are built up by, you know, that are composed of a lot of smaller communities and towns. So if they're working on primary prevention in some capacity, how can we bring those to the table? How could we get them talking to one another? Okay, so Angela Hansen said, I might have missed this. I know there's a cost for the workbook, but is there a cost for the training? So you're asking about Stewards of Children. So just a reminder, Stewards of Children is available online right now. You can get it for free with fliptheswitch.org. Well, Taryn, will you enter the fliptheswitch.org information into the chat box?
Yep, in process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We don't want anybody to leave without knowing how to get to the training information. And I'm going to have you multitask for me, Taryn. We're going to move on to the next
slide. Okay.
Bustling through this.
There you go.
Oh, one more back.
Too far. One more back, sorry.
No worries. So now we're asking really for you to just think of how can your community improve primary prevention for child abuse and trauma? I'm going to read a quick quote and then we'll kind of go into this last question together. But here's the quote. Who else, if not our children, will shape the future? And who else, if not adults, will make sure to eradicate abuse once and for all? I just like that quote. You can see it on the prevention capacity building tool. I think it just kind of connects to the heart of what we're asking here. So you guys may have already started to consider the strengths and weaknesses of your community's interaction with primary prevention. Some of you don't know if you have organizations or hubs or meeting spaces for primary prevention. Some of you might know of organizations that are working on primary prevention, but you don't know how those maybe are connecting to the community as a whole. So I want us to brainstorm on how your community could develop or improve a cohesive primary prevention plan. How your community, maybe that's just your community in the sense of your town or your county or your region, who knows. But for examples, before I have some of you guys share, because I would like to hear some of your lovely voices, you could, for example, talk about ways to improve what's already in place. You could map out what systems should work together to address the need for primary prevention, because we know primary prevention is critical in helping reduce the other types of services needed down the road that are to treat after abuse has already happened. Or you could design ways to strengthen your community's commitment to the primary prevention of child abuse and trauma. So, if anyone is feeling brave, what kind of things are you guys considering for increasing your community's interaction with primary prevention? Like I said, I'm going to give it the nice awkward Zoom silence just as we kind of wait for people to fill in the chat box here or feel brave and shout out.
I was just going to say that we've been trying in those smaller communities like Mountain Home and like Caldwell and Marsing, we've been trying things like reaching out to the schools directly and offering our services so that we can reach more parents and children before they're in the system, because we do get some court ordered folks to our groups and things like that, but like I said, our main goal is prevention, so we're doing our best to kind of talk to those smaller schools and try and get in there. It's a little difficult right now, right? Because they don't know what's going on and everybody's got a lot on their plate. So we've had to put those things on hold, but we're still just kind of checking in every once in a while and being like, hey, we're here, and when things settle, we're ready to go.
Yeah, it is hard right now. The little hubs that we've been trying to create in each community, they're actually called CAPE coalitions, communities aligned in prevention efforts. So those coalitions are designed to kind of help target the need to discuss primary prevention in communities. And when you're thinking about maybe how your organization or your community can work towards creating primary prevention, it doesn't have to start as this huge process. Maybe it's just you really thinking about what you have to answer for this worksheet, and what you feel like maybe you could do to help increase primary prevention. I do want to read a comment that was just made by Caitlin, and she's saying, I'm going to reach out to other organizations in my town to pair with them. I'll also be reaching out to Stewards of Children to see how we can bring trainers to our town or provide a virtual training. And that is an amazing first step. Like, I love that. That actually, Taryn, if you'll flip to the next slide, we have kind of this action step that we're going to ask you all to kind of consider leaving today, because we only have about 3 more minutes. But really, when we're considering everything going on, I mean, it's hard right now to create capacity for primary prevention, but we also know that it's critical to keep trying for that, right? So any other ideas about what you would like to try or things that you think would help increase your community's primary prevention? Maybe I'll bug Taryn Yates and ask her what the trust fund is doing for creating primary prevention, because she has all the answers, right?
All right. Yeah, that is a good question. Well, we're actually in the middle of doing some public awareness to give people better knowledge of what the resources are out there, especially parents who are really stressed out home with their kids right now. but that's kind of prevention in general. It has been challenging to work on training, to coordinate training in the middle of COVID, because everything's been online, and we're doing things. We're definitely working on the education piece through webinars and whatnot, but I would say our big thing is probably we're kind of trying to roll this ball forward on a big public awareness campaign that hopefully we can roll out in the next month.
And public awareness is really important for communities to address how we need to understand the whole of the issue around child abuse and trauma. If a community is not aware of the impact child abuse and trauma has, how are they going to be able to put in steps in place to where we're preventing it, we're helping people who've experienced it, and we're holding people accountable who have, acted that out. And we have a lot of stuff pouring into our chat box. I think that's amazing. We are at 10:15, you guys. I just want to thank you for your time. And then maybe Taryn, if you want to say anything final before we close out.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I am actually a certified instructor for Stewards of Children. So if any of you guys are interested in holding a authorized facilitator training in your area, which would be the training in which to equip people to go out and then be able to hold their own trainings, go ahead and shoot me an email and we can continue that conversation. It's Taryn@stpaulcda.org, and I put that in the chat box as well for your reference. I also had Jesse post a list of Region 1 and 2 people who are current facilitators. The bold ones are the active ones, but that doesn't mean somebody who's not bolded wouldn't want to do your training too. So you can reach out to them individually as well. Thanks so much for hanging in there and engaging in this presentation, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, and one last comment, you can also contact the Idaho Children's Trust Fund if you have any questions about getting a Stewards of Children facilitator to your area, to your organization. And I think I cut off Tara, so Taryn, sorry, I'll let you.
No, that's all I was going to say. And don't forget to take the evaluation, please. It's very helpful for us. And yeah, we're about at that time, so I'll let everybody go. Thank you so much to our facilitators, Shannon and Taryn.
Thanks,
If you want
guys.
to use this capacity building tool, you have access to it. Use it.
It's on the Padlet.